Welcome back to another lecture on topic 1.5. We're going to be talking about the Columbian Exchange, Spanish exploration, and conquest. And our theme for today is going to be geography and the environment. The learning objective for this topic says, explain causes of the Columbian Exchange and its effect on Europe and the Americas during the period after 1492. And we're going to start with this key concept. It says the Columbian Exchange brought new crops to Europe from the Americas, stimulating European population growth and new sources of mineral wealth, which facilitated the European shift from feudalism to capitalism. Let's start with the population growth. The crops that Europeans, and the Spanish particularly, found in the New World were corn, squash, beans, potatoes, tomatoes, avocados. All of these foods that are very nutritious and are able to grow plentifully in a small plot of land are now being exported back to Europe, which in turn helps feed Europeans and helps them live longer. It helps them have more kids, and so therefore the population in Europe begins to increase. You can see on the chart on the bottom right that the European estimated population from 1500 to 1600 nearly doubles. The nutritional value of this food cannot be overestimated. As far as the population growth in other parts of the Old World in Africa, the population continued to increase also because of the crops that were being brought over from the New World, and it helped to offset the population that was being lost to enslaved labor. Going on to the second part of this key concept, we're talking about the shift from feudalism to capitalism. We've touched on this before, but the mineral wealth that was found in the form of gold and silver in Mesoamerica or Mexico, where the conquistadors found silver, and in South America around the Incan Empire where they found gold, helped fuel a market economy. This is not just in Spain, but also in other parts of Europe like England. The gold and the silver got turned into coins, and then the coins are in turn able to be used to purchase goods or to be deposited into banks and then given as loans. That's what leads to a new market economy. Well, if the English have not yet started their exploration at this time into the New World, how is it that the English are benefiting from this? Well, by the 1500s, sea dogs, these are essentially pirates sanctioned by the crown, start to raid Spanish ships in the Atlantic and steal some of these Spanish gold and silver coins, taking them back to Britain. The next key concept here is on other things that affected the Columbian Exchange, improvements in maritime technology and more organized methods for conducting international trade, such as joint stock companies, helped drive changes to the economies in Europe and the Americas. Some of these maritime technologies was the development of the caravel, which was developed by the Portuguese. You can see that the sails that the caravel has are placed in very extreme angles, and the three sails here look like three right triangles, which allow it to sail more directly into the wind without being blown off course. The compass, as you can see on the top right, was most likely borrowed from the Middle Eastern empires, and then on the bottom right you see a sextant. The sextant was a maritime tool that was used to locate exact positions on Earth using the stars and geometry. These are all the things that helped the travel be done. As for the actual logistics of the travel, then the joint stock companies were a new way to fund these explorations. These are going to be more often used in English exploration. It made it possible to raise funds for private companies to travel to the New World and establish some sort of profit-making enterprise. The first permanent English settlement at Jamestown in 1607 will be established by the Virginia Joint Stock Company, and eventually it will try to leverage its tobacco production. The final key concept says Spanish exploration and conquest of the Americas were accompanied and furthered by widespread deadly epidemics that devastated native populations by the introduction of crops and animals not found in the Americas. We will get to the diseases, but first, let's give you more context. By the mid-1500s, the Spanish had already toppled the two largest empires in the New World. Those are the Aztecs and the Incas. Hernan Cortes on the left here is the one who toppled the Aztecs Empire, and Francisco Pizarro on the right is the one that toppled the Incas. Cortes had the help of Aztec rivals. The Aztecs had made enemies of surrounding native tribes, and once the Spanish landed in the New World, they were central in Cortes' abilities to defeating the Aztecs. Cortes was able to navigate these cross-cultural interactions through the use of a translator named Malinche. The Aztecs tried to fight back, and on a night remembered as Noche Triste, they drove the Spanish out of Tenochtitlan, dealing the largest amount of casualties of the Spanish. The Spanish then began a siege of the city that lasts over a month, and it ended with the Aztecs finally surrendering. So after the Spanish victory, they end up changing the landscape. Tenochtitlan was mostly destroyed as a result of the siege, and it begins to be rebuilt. But Spanish buildings begin to go up. Most conspicuously, a cathedral that is built using the same stone that made up the main temple of Tenochtitlan. You can still go to Mexico City today and see the cathedral at the center of the city. And besides it, the archaeological remains of the main temple. Exploration and settlement of California and other parts of North America would continue until the 1700s. You'll start to see the start of the mission system that was started by Junipero Serra. He will establish the missions all across the California coast in the 1700s. Crops that were coming to the New World from the Old World were having a negative impact as well. Sugar plantations were established that were using coerced labor and cleared native plant populations for expanded sugar enterprises. The livestock that was coming over were pigs, cattle, and horses. Some of these had very negative environmental impacts. The pigs and the cattle would sometimes be left out to graze, or they would escape their pens and acted as invasive species because they had no native predators. They would go out and decimate the local flora and fauna. Horses were adopted by some Great Plains Indians, the Comanche, the Apache, and the Sioux. They began to use horses to go out on their buffalo hunts. They were already hunting buffalo before they had access to horses, but now they were even better able to carry out these buffalo hunts. Finally, on to the Old World diseases. Some of these diseases that were brought over were smallpox and measles. We've said that the Aztecs and the other natives did not have natural immunities, and anthropologists estimate that it decimated the New World population by as much as 90% of what it was before European contact. In the previous lecture, we said that there were an estimated 54 million or as high as 54 million people in the New World before European contact. So about 150 years after contact, they were down to 5.4 million people. The diseases that Europeans brought sometimes traveled faster than the Europeans' actual physical location, because the diseases didn't have to be spread by the Europeans themselves. They could infect people who were natives, and then those natives would go further inland following traditional trade routes, infecting people who had never even laid eyes on Europeans. One of the most famous stories that emphasizes this is that when the Mayflower landed in 1620 in Plymouth Rock, they encountered what they described as a wilderness because the people who had been living there had perished due to diseases decades before. However, the English were unaware that the area they happened upon had once been inhabited. Finally, on for your recap, you need to know the effects of New World crops and mineral wealth on Europe. You need to be able to come up with technologies that encourage further exploration. And finally, know that Old World diseases decimated native populations. Thank you for watching. If you would like to watch the next lecture, you can click on the video link on the screen. And if you're looking for more practice to help you on the AP exam, you can visit apushslides.com. I wish you the very best in all of your studying, and I hope to see you back on the next lecture.